It's Jim. I'm just getting up. It's Sunday morning. Wiping the sleep from my eyes. Probably have a little bit of bedhead, but we're friends here, so I'm hoping that doesn't matter. Another vinyl finds. Fat Possum Records had a sale in July, and they have a bunch of records that I like, so there you go. So the last video, or maybe it was a couple videos ago, I did a video about having a problem with buying records. In the middle of that video, the doorbell rang, and I had to get up and answer the door. What I didn't tell you is that while I was joking about the fact that I had a huge stack of records that I just bought, what came to the door was a box with a huge stack of records. So I couldn't quite go the next step and admit that that happened during the video, but I'll show you those records now. So the first record from Fat Possum is 2014's Temples, Sun Structures. Temples are a British neo-psychedelia band. Really nice sound, very sort of faithful to the 60s psych sound, but doesn't feel like a pastiche. It's not quite in the Tame Impala vein, where they kind of take it and marry it with a kind of contemporary pop sound, but it doesn't feel, I don't know, tired. So I like the sound. Yeah, I like Temples. I'll try and do needle drops, but this video may end up being really long. If it is, especially with needle drops, I'll end up maybe doing, splitting this up. That Possum label. And then the next is 2011's Unknown Mortal Orchestra. This is their first. And this again is kind of in that neo-psychedelia, but it's, I like the label for this one. How do I describe? I think UMO is a lot more creative in their application of psych. Just kind of uses it as a springboard for kind of where to take their music, and that's fun. I like what they do. Definitely worth checking out if you don't know them already. 2012 Sweetheart, Sweet Light from Spiritualized. I have not heard this album yet, or the next one, which is another Spiritualized album. I was a big fan of Spiritualized in the 90s. Heard a little bit in the early 2000s, listened to a little bit then, but then just kind of didn't keep following the new records as the years went on. And I thought now was as good time as ever to take a listen because, you know, it was great music back then. And I had a tendency to kind of only listen to bands in their kind of seminal period. So when they would first start, I'd be really interested and excited about them. And I think a lot of it was hearing a new sound and then, you know, kind of always going on to the next new sound. And so I didn't always follow bands through. And one of the things that's happened with the VC is that I'm trying to give a little bit more focus to bands that I really enjoyed and see kind of what became of them and where they took their sound. And I've been finding a lot of really interesting things about that some of it is just following the members of a band through to other projects, but some of it is just following a band through and seeing how they progressed and how their sound changed over the years. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Hey Jane, where you going today? You took a car, then you ran all day. That clock going 110. I never said I'd get you back again. Said you ain't got time to make no mistakes. Ain't got time to waste my brakes. Hey Jane, where you going today? You lit a fire, then you found the flame.
And to this, which I don't remember the name of, it's Spiritualized. Oh, great, it's in Braille. I'm trying to remember the name of this record. Give me a second. That one is called And Nothing Hurt. So this is, I think, 2017's And Nothing Hurt from Spiritualized. The actually, it's not Braille. I believe it's Morse code. So the tracks, the track listing, the title, the label artwork, it's all in Morse code. So, yeah, clever, but doesn't help when you're talking about it. So I'm really looking forward to listening to both of these, which I, again, have not heard. Coming up next is one that I have heard, and that's Al Green's Greatest Hits. I love Al Green, but I was kind of glad to come across this on Fat Possum because I have to say that I don't always love Al Green. I probably had 5 or 6 of his records, and I would find myself engaging with about half the material usually. So there was a lot of hit and miss with me and Al Green, but this is just, you know, one great track after another that I just really loved. And there's nothing wrong with you know, most of his albums, and some of them are phenomenal, but rather than kind of pick through 10 or 12 records, was kind of a nice thing to do. So next is two from the Black Keys, Thick Freakness and Rubber Factory. So these are numbers 2 and 3 in their list of albums. Thick Freakness was their second, and Rubber Factory was their third. I love the Black Keys sound. I think that they do a great job with kind of garage blues. I don't know how else to describe them, but they have that kind of lo-fi production and just simple guitar and drums. A lot of people compare them to the White Stripes, but to me that's sort of like comparing Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. Like they have similar instrumentation, but they're very different bands. Just because there's two people in them and they're guitar and drums, they don't sound the same. Gooch Palms are the same, drums and a guitar, and they're nothing like this. So I think that's a really superficial observation. Great records. And then the last one I got from Fat Possum was Tennis's first record, Cape Dory. If you don't know Tennis, I know I spoke about them a little bit ago. There might have been their most recent record, or one record removed from their most recent. But this is their first from 2011. It's a husband and wife duo, and they had met in college, and after college they spent like half a year on a sailboat on the East Coast. And this record kind of comes right after that, where they're kind of telling stories from that trip, and they're kind of getting the feeling of that trip across. And it's really a great record. The sound is very sort of 50s filtered through nostalgia, and it's kind of the way that David Lynch looks back at the 50s, but not quite as dark and morbid. Next, I've got a stack of records that I got from the local shop, and it's kind of all over the place, so I'll just step through them. The Walkman Heaven from 19, wow, I'm in the wrong century, from 2012. I really enjoyed the Walkman's first few albums. I had them on CD, and then probably streamed the next couple and listened to probably the first 3 or 4 pretty regularly in the early to mid 2000s, I guess. And then I just sort of stopped listening to their releases after that. For no particular reason, I just forgot about them, I guess. And this is their last release from 2012 before, I'm guessing, they split up. Hamilton Lighthouser went off and has his own solo career, and I haven't heard of them being together since then. Gatefold. I haven't heard this, so I'm curious what it sounds like. But it was a good deal, so.
Oh, it's been so long that I made it through. It's been so long. We'll never leave.
Next is Golden Palominos. This is the Omaha 12-inch. This is from 1985, I believe. Golden Palominos were, maybe still are, I think technically they still show up every once in a while. Anton Fear, the drummer out of New York, I believe, has a kind of collective, working with people like Bill Laswell and others, that has made a bunch of records through the 80s and 90s. This record, this is a cover of Moby Grape's Omaha. Michael Stipe on vocals. This is from the second Golden Palominos record, which is a really good record. I actually really like their music in general. Record by record, it really changes up a lot. And so, you know, each one is fairly different. But I haven't been disappointed by any of them. This, though, I went back and listened to it again. I hadn't listened to it in a long time. And it really made me realize, well, I listened to it back to back with the Moby Grape original, and it made me really realize what people are talking about these days when they talk about 80s production and especially 80s drums. And it's definitely something that can catch you and can really, if you're listening for it, it can really be unpleasant in a lot of ways. A lot of it is just, you know, the sort of gated reverb, you know, the short sound of the drums, and that's really evident on this record, and that's interesting to me because Fear is such a talented drummer, and probably was just fascinated by the sound at the time. But though I love Michael Stipe's vocals on this, I thought he did a phenomenal job, and it was perfectly suited to him. I did think that the music behind it just didn't catch me the way it did at the time, especially listening to it as opposed to the Moby Grape original. I love the music on the Moby Grape version, but I like Michael Stipe's vocals better on the Golden Palominos version. Is what it is. Hey, this is getting kind of long, so I'm gonna break this up into two parts, and it'll continue as part 2.